Well, this is interesting. Matt, in person, how are you?
Finally get to meet.
Yes. My name is Stefan Stelter.
And my name is Matt Brown.
And we're excited to host Cloud Chat live and in person. This is a fascinating experience.
Fascinating.
It's wonderful to see you.
Took way too long to do this, but yes, very, very nice to see you in person.
Likewise.
Yeah, no virtual stuff, no weird things or dogs barking or birds yelling.
Yes. These are all things that we've managed to avoid, or we will manage to avoid for the next.
And we're in a real office.
It's fascinating.
Coming to you from RTP.
Indeed. Indeed. Where there is a data center, which is also interesting, tying some of our other cloud chats together. That data center, keep them. Yeah. Don't keep them. Will they continue to exist? We walked through a couple. It's been a lot of fun.
It was fascinating, wasn't it?
It sure was.
I think a lot of people don't realize what it takes to, provide all that capability. And you can kind of understand why people want to move to the cloud, to not have to worry about all that. But when you walk through it, you can see the magnitude of equipment that somehow needs to be replicated somewhere else.
Yes.
Now it's just not an academic conversation. It's actually a real conversation. Behind every server is an application, and behind every application is a business process that has to somehow stop or change or evolve. So, yeah, it was a very fascinating thing. Even though I grew up in the data centers, it's always a reminder to go back and see how much it takes to keep the business running.
And the problem at scale becomes interesting too. And there's such a variety of scales when it comes to data centers to see, this is one point, the data center that NetApp has here in RTP is of a certain scale, and it can accommodate a certain number of devices. There are larger and there are smaller.
Oh, yeah.
And the systems that support them vary. It's interesting to look at them and to imagine the sunk cost in data centers that are all over.
Oh, my goodness.
The world. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting, too. We saw a couple of what I would call older pieces of equipment. And when you inquired, why is it old? They go, well, it can't be turned off because it provides a critical management of a critical process. Yeah. And you're like, so this isn't just a technology conversation, is it? Yeah. If it's supporting a critical process, that means that critical process has to stop to make that change. So then you start to get the scope of really what it takes to move a data center from on-prem.
Indeed.
To the cloud.
Indeed.
It's very fascinating. This isn't just a technology conversation.
Yes. What processes need to change, do they? And it is interesting as we come together and being physically in the same place, and how will that resumption of work look in the IT sense? Certainly all the gear has always been in the data center. Yep. Even while COVID was happening, the gear did not need to wear masks. The gear was turning away doing its thing. Right. And we left it alone for a while, and we are coming back to it. I'm sure some people went into the data center, but it's interesting to see what will have changed as we come back.
Yeah.
And look at.
Well, and it's funny too, because walking through the data center too, there is an implied, you want to call it, I'm going to use the word governance, that's not probably a fair word here, but if you have fixed racks and you have fixed people doing things every day, there's people managing it. Maybe managing is a good word to start with. When you move that tangible from a physical data center into a logical space, that management still needs to happen, right?
Yes.
And it needs to be actually even more sensitive, because now you're moving it beyond your control, and things like security, costs, agility, flexibility all become more of a thing. At least when I was in a box, I knew how much that box can do.
Yes.
Right? And now
I don't have where to physically put
it. Yeah. I knew that was important and that wasn't.
Yes. Yes.
And I could provide different rules when it was physically. Yes. When I'm moving them virtually, all those things become, I think, interesting challenges. And I think when we're seeing our peers, when we're talking to customers, our peers who are struggling with this, that's really all the things that are behind their minds when we're talking about moving to the cloud, right? They're going, how the hell am I going to do this? Or how am I going to do that? That's what's in the back of their head.
In my head, as you describe this, I think about, this is a very odd analogy, but there's when you throw something off of a high height, and it might be because I have a fear of heights, but as I'm dropping something from a high height, this action of letting it go and realizing you won't be able to get it back, or like a balloon that you've got, and you realize there's a bit of anxiety, like if I let this balloon go, it's going to go
somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that you lose control
once
of
I can't reach it anymore, it's that loss of control. I wonder if that's
it has
a
to
feeling
be
when you go into if you're carrying and feeding for this service, this capability on premises, as you bring it into the cloud, and at some point you have to let it go. The tethers are,
because your responsibilities don't change.
Yeah.
Right. The security people are still responsible for the security. The applications people are still responsible for making sure the users can access that application.
Doesn't it feel like there's a great hope that that's all done somewhere else by someone else? Right? There's a sense, because you know that it's being done in your physical data center for you. The security people are doing that. There's physical security, obviously, but there are other elements to security also, obviously. But you know that it's these folks in security. They're in that room and they know how to do those things. When it's in the cloud, there's also that sense of, I wonder if security people feel that same sense of like, I can't get physically to the security devices.
They want to know they can, but see, I think everything you're saying is the apprehension why our customers are facing going to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
How? You're saying go to the cloud, and I'm thinking about, well, how am I going to do all this stuff? And I'm trying to help you go to the cloud, but I'm not really understanding what's causing your hesitation, and everything we're talking about is all the hesitation behind it, right? And I think it's fascinating because the other piece that comes into play is we heard examples in one of your sessions about a customer who moved one server to the cloud.
Yeah.
And they went from a very predictable sunk cost, and let's take a side note here. Most IT shops do not pay for data centers. That's in a facilities thing. So they don't pay for the data center. Most IT shops buy hardware that gets depreciated at a 3-year schedule. And if they go beyond 3 years, there is no depreciation anymore. So in essence, I don't want to say it's free, but there is no operational cost to it.
Right.
And now I'm moving to a model where it's all operational. Well, this instance, all of a sudden, not paying for facilities and sunk cost in terms of a long ago depreciated item goes into a cloud, and now it's costing me $18,000 a month, or $18,000 a day was the example they gave us, right?
Yes.
A real world example. Well, how do you justify that, right?
Yes.
And more importantly, how do you manage that? And is it a situation where they went and bought Peak because they wanted to guarantee the service that they had before because that's the world they lived in, and now the cost model is just different, right? So how do I evolve from there? And I think there's a lot of conversations to be had, because I think that's actually why that seems really high and expensive. I imagine there's probably examples like that all over the place.
Yes.
So then how do you bring some of those controls back? How do you bring some of that essence of really managing what you need versus, a grotesque maybe overusage in that connotation, to really get to the core of really what the service is about? I don't know. There's something there, I think.
There is. And it seems like there's a shift in the things you need to worry about in that governance.
Yeah, I think so too.
And when you think about the things that are important when you own the asset versus the maybe the changing of importance to other areas when it becomes something that is operationalized, there's some measures of.
Well, and to contrast and compare, the data center, if I were to ask those folks in the data center, how much network is this one server using? I guarantee they could probably tell me what it is. How much CPUs am I using? How much power am I using? They can see all that. In the cloud, I no longer can see all that. I'm just getting a bill, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I can look and
Log in
I can get some information about it. But I have to then... if I have 50 servers, I'm not going to log into every server to manage that. Although when it's in my data center, I know my working capacity at any given time. As a collective, I may or may not have that in the cloud, right?
Yeah. Well, I wonder about that. Do you have the ability, depending on how you're keeping track of these things, are you...
As an aggregate?
Yes.
I know
Are there means... Well,
there are
when
lots
you do the
of
things
tools
that you do on premises, you can use some of that capture and collection. What is the health of this virtual device, and how much CPU and memory is it using?
Yeah.
I wonder do you bring your traditional tools with you to the cloud?
I don't think that works. I don't know. The cloud offers all kinds of tools. It's interesting in that conversation. I think one of the most interesting tools that we have that's new to our toolkit is things like CloudCheckr. And for me personally, being a management, working from a guy who started his career in the data center, it was quite refreshing to be able to see a tool that not only can tell you what you're using, but more importantly, tell you what was idle and not being used, and make recommendations for alternative capabilities. And I don't want to go too far down that pace, but it also can make alternatives for like Spot, right?
Yep.
Different alternative methods to help me achieve those goals. So those are, I think, tools that can help alleviate some of the conversations that we were having about how do you change, how do you get customers comfortable?
Yeah.
How do you get them more... how do you give them the tools that maybe they're losing by moving to the cloud? I think that may be a great opportunity to see how that could maybe help ease that pain a little bit.
Part of me thinks about this transition as you go into the cloud and you do things in the cloud the way that you did them on premises to some extent, right? You're thinking about CPUs rather than being within a physical box. You're thinking about them in this completely abstract construct, but going well beyond the things that just that copying of approaches, but the serverless approaches, right? These things that are completely different, completely unique, and bringing on capabilities that you don't have on premises, or it would be very difficult for you to bring up, like an AI capability where suddenly that becomes a very large, expensive project if you want to dabble and see how AI and ML might help your business as you're making widgets. If you could make them more efficiently or more effectively, if it improve the quality by doing some AI work on data that you're collecting, it'd be nice to be able to do that without investing a whole bunch in the infrastructure to do it. But what does that look like, and what does the instrumentation look like? Because now it's something that's completely different. I'm relying on the analytics engine that's provided by the serverless infrastructure from the cloud. I don't know if CloudCheckr can instrument those things that are non-traditional infrastructure and help you get a sense for non-traditional infrastructure mimicked in the cloud. Right. What does serverless look like?
I still think it becomes a tool to at least give you an idea of what idle resources are, whether it's traditional or non-traditional, though. Yeah. So, but that's actually a very interesting concept. Well, it's interesting too, because I know in our own IT shop, we're facing these real-world challenges about how do you make this. I'm going to use the word leap. That's not fair because it's not really a leap. It's a migration. It's a slow, methodical change. But it is a whole different set of looking at your responsibilities don't change, right? You're still here to provide capabilities, to provide service, to provide the agility, to keep it secure, make it available, and supposedly take less time of your time to help deliver those capabilities. And I think that's the biggest challenge is how do you make that transition, right? Yeah. And it's not like you're moving everything at the same time. You're moving everything piecemeal. So how do you do it in an order that you can consume that change and eventually transition from worrying about the power and the cooling and the what's in what rack and where to now actually focusing on what the capabilities that you're providing. So I think that transition is something it is a thing that will take time, and it will take. You have to understand that with your customers, that it's not something. It's not you just turn off a light switch, right? There is a process behind that. There's a methodology behind that, and then how we help is providing them the capabilities and the tools that they need to do that.
Yes, we had chatted a little bit about aligning to business processes and finding out how does with some of the changes your job doesn't change, but it does change in some ways. Right. So how do we leverage some of the ways that it's changed to help improve the way that IT interacts with the business process side of things? Is that
well back to that example where the person in the data center clearly understood it was a critical process it supported. We're aware of those critical processes, right? But those critical processes, IT needs to understand them more to offer alternatives while we're migrating that from a physical box to running maybe somewhere else, right?
Yes.
Which implies IT needs to understand more about how the business is actually consuming these services and be more involved in the process itself to help that orderly transition, because you're never going to turn them off.
No.
Imagine running a hospital or something that's really a nuclear power plant. You can't just say we're going to stop monitoring it for 14 days while IT makes the change. That's not. So how are you going to make that transition? IT needs to understand how these processes work so we can figure out that path to transition to moving it from a physical to a more of a cloud-based type of a service. And those are things that we have to be sensitive about our customers. And the more we understand that, the more we can offer opportunities to help alleviate that. So,
yeah, maybe that's exactly the inflection point, the opportunity as we, as customers, are exploring this new world of cloud. It's not so new anymore, but as
it feels new.
It's new to them, right? And it feels new.
Talk to customers every day, and I feel like they're we just learned about this thing about cloud, and we need to get there. Okay, cool.
Yes. Well, maybe that's the inflection point in the organization where the most forward-thinking IT organizations can bring a new perspective to the process side of things and make sure that we're getting looped in and tied in.
And the more,
help.
and actually, the more IT understands the process, I honestly believe the more opportunities we can give the business as alternatives to help support that process even better.
Love it. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Fun food
always,
for thought.
always fun chatting with
Matt.
you.
Likewise. Wonderful to do it in person.
Yes,
Thanks
yes,
everybody
yes,
for
yes.
joining us for this episode of Cloud Chat with Stefan and Matt. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, comment, alarm, alert, do things that indicate that you enjoyed it.
Reach out, say hi. Love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
Until the next one.